In a time of rising unrest, when borders dominate headlines and immigration policy shapes the future of our nation, the truth matters. From the front lines of law enforcement, national security, and public policy, this is Frontline Facts, where rhetoric is stripped away, where politics takes a back seat, and where facts, hard, documented facts, lead the conversation. As instability grows beyond our southern border, as communities feel the impact at home, we bring you informed voices. Attorneys, senior law enforcement leaders, policy experts, and professionals who understand the law, the protocols, and the consequences. This isn't opinion. This isn't spin. This is clarity in a time of confusion. This is Frontline Facts, and the conversation starts now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Louisa Disci, your host of Frontline Facts, Correcting the Rhetoric, and today's guest is Mr. Mark Goloby, and he is actually a candidate running for Texas governor. So welcome this morning, Mark Goloby. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing well, Louisa. Thank you. I am from the sunny city of Floresville, Texas today. Went to a Floresville Republican Women Luncheon and met there with a lot of the people and had a chance to go through and talk about my campaign and issues people should be thinking about across Texas and visiting on those issues and saying we need to be looking out for the fact that we have too much of our money is being taxed away from us, both sales tax and property tax. And then they go through there and it's starting to become like a personal piggyback for some of these politicians to spend any way they want to and create corporate welfare accounts and those kind of issues. So, let's get into it.
Well, I wanted to first get started with give me a little bit about your background. I know that you were actually born, you got here probably as fast as you could, but all your paperwork says that you actually were from Tennessee. Or your family's from Tennessee, and you're also an A&M graduate. That's impressive. Give me a little bit about your background and what you've done throughout your life and what has led you to this point where you want to run for governor.
Well, like I say, I've been a constitutional conservative Republican all my life and fighting for constitutional causes. And I've been involved in the Republican Party going back to the 80s. The last millennia, as my grandchildren like to tell me, helping with a number of different issues. In that process, so I've served as a precinct chair, I've gone to state conventions, all those things. And then I started getting involved with a corporate welfare scheme about 10 or 15 years ago called Chapter 313 of the Texas Tax Code. And this is where there's a little convoluted thing, but it's corporate welfare. So these are under the guise of economic development. They would go through there and they would say that they're creating jobs, which of course we're happy with. They're creating $65,000 a year jobs, which we're happy with. And then you find out that the company's getting $216,000 to do it per job. And you're sitting there going, okay, give me $216,000. I'll find somebody to give $65,000 to. So these are not economic development plans. These are corporate welfare schemes. Well, the grassroots, we led it and got that defeated. And that just started getting me rolling deeper and deeper and deeper into our state financing, our state expenditures, and becoming more and more ingrained in exactly which to me is fundamental. One of the things I talk about on my website, good governance, not today. Well, one of the most fundamental of any governance is how it gets funded. And so that's where I focus a lot of my attention is on the kind of policies that they're putting in place on our state funding and our state expenditures.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. You certainly have the pedigree, so to speak, to be able to run for governor. Tell me a couple of the initiatives that are like the top 3 or 4 that are key elements in your campaign and why those are so important to you. Let's start with the one that you've got at the top of your list.
The top of my list is these, what they call surpluses, which are not surpluses. They're over collected taxes. And a governor going through saying we have surpluses year after year after year is not something to brag about. It's something to be ashamed about. You're overtaxing your citizens year after year after year. So we need to be able to go through there and figure out how do we stop that kind of a cycle. Well, one is we go through there and we do a sales tax cut. Now, I get into a lot of conversations on this, and we'll continue through this because it gets pretty deep. But a sales tax cut, everybody pays into the sales tax. Every Texan, even the little kid buying a candy bar, pays into the sales taxes. We go through there now, how by reducing it, we will reduce the purchase price of every single, not the purchase price, but the cost of every single taxable purchase that man, woman, and child makes in Texas. And why that's important is because 1/3 of Texans do not own property. So they're paying into the property tax. If all we're going to do is look at ways to relieve property owners, that's great. But how do we address the 1/3 of the Texans who don't own property? So I go through there and say, look, a sales tax cut is the start. That will allow every man, woman, and child to save money. It will help the young adults who are trying to save money for that down payment for their first home, which most of them realize their first time they'll buy a home of their own is at 40 years old, because that's what the national average is. We address that. We start to talk about, let's cut those costs. Let's take a little bite out of inflation in the state of Texas. Then we can go through there and say, let's take a look at property tax reform. And when you start looking at that, we say first, the any property tax rate increase has to be approved by the voters. The taxable appraisal value can only increase by the rate of inflation. The governor's plan is 3%, but the rate of inflation right now is like 2.4 or 2.5. So this would be a much better plan. It's more measurable. It's more understandable than just some blanket percentage. Then we go through and start to look at our property tax exemptions, and the homestead exemption should apply to every taxing authority. Right now, it only has to apply to the school districts. Other taxing authorities can recognize the abatement as they so choose. School districts have to. And I'm saying if I have a homestead, it's a homestead, and every taxing authority should have to recognize that exemption.
Well,
So,
the taxes for homeowners has gone skyrocketing in Texas in the last several years, especially after the major floods. But I mean, how do you feel about the possibility of eliminating the taxes for the elderly who've been already paying so many years, and most of them have homes that have been paid off, and they don't have children in school districts and things of that nature?
yes, and that's one of the things I was proposing during the voucher discussion was a no child in district tax exemption. That would apply to seniors as well as the other people who are just starting their families, don't have kids in the school district, and the people who put their kids into homeschool, private school. They would all be able to go through there and qualify for a no child in district tax exemption. Obviously, that failed as far as and I get into a lot of these conversations because people say, oh, we want to eliminate property tax. Well, no, you don't. What you're saying is you're going to replace the property tax. I'm the only person right now in all of Texas saying I'm going to cut the taxes you pay. When I reduce the sales tax, it cuts the taxes you pay. It cuts the Treasury by $16 billion.
Wow.
But guess what? There's still $7 billion left. That's how overtaxed we are. So,
Insane.
yes. And so that's why, again, a 1% sales tax cut goes through and bites into that. It relieves everybody. Now, when we go through there and we start talking about property tax relief, remember, property taxes is local. Property taxes is local. Sales tax is at the state level. I can make it happen as governor by September 1st, 2027. Right? Every Texan could be paying less on their taxable purchases. That's how fast we can make it happen. I looked at the property tax reform plans out of Florida. I've looked at them they did one up in Idaho, and I've looked at these, and they're all, nip and tuck, bit by bit, little by little type things. I can cut that sales tax just like that. It can be just like that. Okay. Going back to the quote unquote eliminate, I say you're not eliminating anything, you're just replacing. Okay. And what difference does it make to people? You're going to pay $5,000. Let's just use a number, $5,000 in your property taxes. Okay. Or even 10. I mean, I hear a lot more, but at any rate, does it really matter if you're paying $5,000 with your left pocket or your right pocket? No, what you want to pay is less. My passion is for all Texans to pay less taxes, less sales, less property taxes. I can address the sales tax directly. Property taxes we can do through other things. And then I need to turn to the grassroots and say, when somebody walks in and says, I want to run to be your county commissioner, your city council, your school district board, okay? The next question out of your mouth should be, how much are you going to cut the taxes? We have to start pushing these elected officials to realize we want our property taxes cut. And it's happening. Right now in Harris County, we've got one of our candidates for judge committed to a 2% property tax. That's what we need to do as our own grassroots. Remember, property taxes are local. Attack it locally and start to force more conversations about lowering the property tax rate. The state, I can make it to where any tax increase has to be voted on, which would make it very difficult for them to raise taxes. I can make it to where you can only increase the appraisal value by the rate of inflation. I can go through there and pass how many times they reappraise property. The law currently says you only have to do it every 3 years. That's the current law. The fact that these appraisal districts do it every year is another side discussion, but they only have to do it every 3 years. And that would be another help for people to sit there and at least have the same property tax for 3 years in a row, as opposed to every year jacking it up a little bit.
That's nuts. That's absolute insanity. But,
We
we saw a big shift in a couple major areas that were designated as flood areas, and now those property taxes skyrocket. And, you really want to, the push for years now has been everybody should be in a home. And I disagree with that. Not everybody deserves to be in a home. I spent about 15 years working credit and helping people restore their credit. And, not everybody, and some people need to spend some time in an apartment and build their credit up before they start buying properties that they're obviously buying in excess of what they can actually afford. And that propels the entire problem altogether. But, I don't know. You give me your spin on that. I just think that there are people that merit being in a home, but I think, I waited for a while till my credit was up to par where I could afford it, because credit affects everything. But the property taxes can't continue to increase. People are just we're going to be taxed to death.
Yes, no. We have to definitely, again, the whole property tax situation has to be fixed. But again, it's a local issue. If we start to go through there and try to replace it, I tell people, be careful what you ask for. You say you want to eliminate. Well, guess what? We wanted to get rid of the star test. We got 3 star tests. Okay. So we asked for these things and the legislature passes and you end up with worse than what you had. So again, I say, when you start talking about eliminate property tax, be careful what you ask for. Regarding the whole home ownership issue, that's something that I have been talking to many of our young adults about. And one of the things that I look at is these young adults trying to buy their first home. And the next thing you know, they're competing against these mega equity firms, global equity firms, and foreign nations to buy residential homes. And I'm going through saying, let's take a look at our state chartered banks and start to see how we can use those, kind of like the when you and I were younger, the savings and loan that were directed and focused on residential financial instruments. Okay. And tell these BlackRock and some of these other large equity firms, You need to be investing in the reindustrialization of America, like shipyards and other large investment projects with this portfolio you have. You don't belong in the residential market. You're not there to warp that market with your buying power against young adults just trying to get their first home. Private property is the bedrock, or at least one of the very, very significant foundations for a free society. And we need to be ensuring that our young adults have the same access to that as we did. And I go through and I challenge people too, because you get back into the property tax. I said, especially for the younger adults, isn't it interesting that now that the World Economic Forum says you won't own anything and you'll be happy, is the time that now they want to get rid of property taxes and replace it with consumption taxes. So we're going to own the property, you're going to pay consumption taxes, but because we're not going to pay property taxes because we're going to get rid of them, quote unquote, for you. And that's something that I feel like, as someone who is very passionate about the plight of our young adults and ensuring that they have access to the freedoms and the things that we did and that we got supported on in the way of home ownership, in the way of low cost higher education and things of that nature. So with that, again, I'm very much aware of that and think that the avenue could very well be within our state chartered banks.
When we look at, for example, in the state of California, all the people that really want to push to have illegal criminal aliens owning homes and special loans and creative lending and all these other things, that's a great concern because those are high risk loans. That doesn't help any state do anything or move forward. In fact, it just creates a vacuum of abandoned homes and properties that, eventually the banks will take over, or even not even the banks. I mean, that's the bigger concern. Is I've always said, yes, you have to be a homeowner, but there are people that should not be homeowners. And I look at it from the immigration standpoint of, we do have a lot of foreign investors that come in and purchase properties, but at the end of the day, we're seeing, a lot of the Chinese are coming in and buying farms and all that stuff. Well, we certainly don't want that. I know that there's been regulations and things on the table that are trying to eliminate that from happening or continuing to happen. But what is your stance as if you are in a government, in the governor position, to be able to make some determinations as to who can buy and who can't, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, foreign nations, and then when you start getting into the foreign nations and the Chinese, you have to also be careful of them fronting someone as as an individual, when indeed they're being backed by the Chinese Communist Party. As far as I don't know. That's a good question. As far as, do we start to do things like they have in Mexico, to where foreign nationals cannot? You have to be a citizen to buy property in the United States. I don't know. That might be something to definitely consider, given how we've allowed this open border. Of course, the real question is to go through a closure border and then fix your immigration, and then do the things that are difficult right now, which is deporting some of these people who definitely do not belong in our country, and overcoming we have the laws in our favor. It's the political will to implement those laws that's lacking, and we have a lot of, obviously, pushback from the other party that says that they should be able to stay, and whatever kind of stories they have. How do we address that by governor? I would say, again, I'm hoping by promoting more access to our legal young adults. Some of that would help alleviate some of these problems. And again, as governor, again, and this is on my website, goodgovernance.today, I talk about the power of a governor to enforce their border. It's on my website. Ken Cuccinelli, a constitutional scholar, details exactly how. And I say all the time, the fact that the Texas border and the U.S. border are the same is a matter of geography, not sovereignty. And therefore, we should be, the governor should go through there and enforce the border to protect his citizens, their lives, their livelihoods, and their property.
Well, and that's exactly what Governor Abbott did because the other states did not. But we saw numbers that we've never seen before. And I come from Legacy INS and ICE, and I can tell you one thing, those numbers were horrifying. You got 20,000 illegal aliens, many of them criminal aliens coming through from terrorist countries or terrorist-supported countries across the southern border. And it is a grave danger for the citizens and the communities. And I know that, federal law trumps, no pun intended, most other laws, but Governor Abbott did put the Texas DPS officers down there. And of course, what's more important is also to make sure that we have people that are deputized in different sheriff's departments and different chiefs of police so that we can accomplish this. But the fact of the matter is, we just can't continue to have an open border. That's just not safe for anybody. But you're right. I mean, as governor, you have to have good governance. And some of these things are just plain out common sense.
You would think so. And again, I mean, packing these people, go through and you look at the issues in Minneapolis. Well, how much of that issues in Minneapolis and in New York electing a communist are rooted in the fact that we were taking these people and busting them into those locations. And now, great, we got them out of Texas, but we still put them into the United States. We should have pushed them back. And you're right, the terrorist nations, but my goodness gracious, as you well know, some of the most ruthless people aren't coming from foreign countries far away. Mexico, those cartels are brutal, vicious.
They are in charge of that southern border. They are in charge of Mexico. They've got control. And, I've learned through the last couple of 48 hours on those horrible incidents and those attacks. This new generation of the Jalisco cartel is one of the most violent. They were separated as a fragmented piece of the Zetas, which are also very incredibly violent. But I didn't realize that they operate very successfully and really have a large, area of responsibility, and that they literally control about 31 of the states in Mexico. The cartel violence is, people that haven't lived that, you don't want that on this side of the border. I mean, people are being dismembered and put in garbage bags and dumped, and children disappearing and things like that. And they're in complete control of drug smuggling, child trafficking, you name it. It is very, very scary what happens.
Yes, I agree with you on that. As we're seeing from this latest incident in Mexico, it looks like they were right within the president's domain, running things out of the president's office too. If some of these rumors and things that are coming out recently about just how ingrained they are at the most high levels of the Mexican government.
Yeah, and the corruption runs very, very deep. But that's a problem Mexico's had for many, 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 many decades. It just up beyond that violence doesn't spill over to the U.S. side. And of course, you've got them infighting along the border across from in the Tijuana area. And just American citizens need to heed the warnings. They keep saying these cartels are threatening American lives because they're disrupting their cartel operations. And, unfortunately, I think we need to do a lot of things in this state. One of them being, helping with deterring that from happening, but also by way of the educational pieces down to the grassroots with children. Don't do drugs. It's not enough. We've got to deal with it. You can't just lock up people for their first offense. We don't have enough bed space. But I wanted to move on a little bit farther now and talk really about your bigger vision. You talked about it briefly about the STAR tests or the testing in schools. As a former parent, now my kids are adults. But I can remember just getting so frustrated with schools in the public districts just because they're teaching and training on the tax tests, which are difficult in itself, but they're not teaching the basic courses needed. And I know that we fall short with other countries in our educational, especially after COVID, but what are your recommendations as you run through your campaign to fix some of the issues in the school districts and the way that we provide specific education to our children?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. And again, on my website, I do have a whole approach, and I call it changing how we deliver Texas public education. One of the things that I point to is that the current education commissioner appointed by the governor has been there for 10 years. And there's no metric of our children's learning ability that he can point to that is up. The size of the agency is up, the cost of the agency is up, but the results are dismally down. And that is a very big disservice to our children, this generation. I'm talking about the young generation now, and then the children that they're going to have. So my great-grandchildren, if you will. So what I am proposing is that this education commissioner become an elected position. This person should be accountable to the parents and the taxpayers of Texas, not the governor. This person should be just like me, driving around the state, telling about how to address public education in Texas, and have to go in there and explain why. Hopefully we would want to get rid of them, but how they're going to get rid of these filthy books, how they're going to clean up these illicit relationships that seem to break every day across the state, how they're going to address this DEI and get back to a fundamental reading, writing, and arithmetic metric. So right now, I was up in Dallas with a lady who had opened up her house, and she said she feels her grandkids are getting the 3 R's, but they're writing, ranting, and what was the third one? Ranting, raving, and writing was the 3 R's she feels her grandchildren are getting.
Listen, we're going to have to cut over to a commercial break real quick because we do have sponsors we want to highlight. Thank you for waiting.
When the stakes are high, clarity matters. In today's fast-moving media environment, misinformation spreads fast, especially around immigration policy, national security, and public safety. That's where Disci Consulting Services steps in. Led by Louisa Disci, former investigative journalist, DHS and ICE subject matter expert, and certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, Disci Consulting equips leaders, candidates, law enforcement, and executives with clear posture, confident delivery, and fact-based messaging. From immigration policy education and media response strategy to crisis communication and executive message development, Disci Consulting helps you cut through the rhetoric and speak with authority. Whether you're preparing for a press conference, navigating a complex policy issue, or facing high-pressure media scrutiny, we prepare you to lead. Disci Consulting Services. Strategic communication, informed leadership, measured response. Contact Disci Consulting today and be ready when it matters most. Call today 832-244-2488 or email louisa@discinconsultingservices.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Frontline Facts, where the rhetoric matters. We are correcting the rhetoric. I do have my esteemed guest today. He is Mark Goloby. He's not only a very good friend of mine, but I have a lot of respect for him and what he's trying to do, and he's running for Texas governor. As we left for the commercial break, we discussed a little bit about the educational system and what you were hoping to do and all this crazy texting and testing. But let's hit on something that I really want to point out. And that is, what is your view? And I know that this affects the rest of the country, but it does affect Texas high school students and students that are walking off these campuses that are actually protesting ICE. In my opinion, we've talked about what's going on with schools, and when you stop doing DEI, you're trying to get rid of the wokeness. But if you were in Dallas, I've heard of stories about students walking out, and they've walked out here, and there's been kids that have been run over, and I think that's highly irresponsible for any teacher or any scholastic entity to allow them to walk off campus during school hours. What is your thought on that?
Well, it's obviously a breakdown in the discipline of the school, and it's being allowed and promoted in nefarious ways. I also go through and like to remind people that when I was in high school, there were walkouts from then over the Vietnam War, and it was essentially the same communist row that is now driving this kind of disruption in our children's lives, and bringing all this type of thing. This is inappropriate behavior by adults to go through there and encourage, and it was inappropriate back then, and it was inappropriate to sit there and allow the kids to go out there and do that kind of things, on the campus. You're in high school, whatever, you're there to learn, and you should be focused on your scholastics. You'll have plenty of time in your lifetime to do this other thing. The standpoint of, again, it's just a breakdown in the school discipline, and that's one of the things I look at. And again, I would love to have somebody campaigning across the state for the education commissioner and hear the constant discipline. Every day there's discipline problems in these schools, and part of it is legislative actions that restrict the school's ability to necessarily punish and address some of these issues directly at the school level. So again, that's something I feel like it'd be great for that person to be traveling around and having to hear the parent, the teachers, the abuse our teachers have. If they worked for a corporation, they would have so many lawsuits of harassment that, no corporation could survive it. It's absolutely horrible what some of these teachers have to endure from these kids, and no one wants to address it and fix it. Well, I think if there was to be an elected, that person would have to at least address it, and at least be aware, and at least go back to the Texas legislature and say, look, man, you've got to help me out here, because these parents are absolutely in a panic over the fights and the constant stuff that happens within these schools. So again, you have a lack of discipline. Well, of course, the next thing you know, you can walk out and go walk in the streets and do your little riot and protest and whatever. And you can feel like you'll get away with that.
Well, and the other thing is the wokeness in schools, the teachings, and of course, this gender reassignment, and parents a couple of years back. And I think that there's continued to be a lot of battles. For example, in McKinney, Texas, I've got a really good friend who's helping some candidates up there, and he's at the Texas school board's town halls all the time. And it's just, we need God back into our schools. We need to remove the garbage from the libraries, and we need to give the power back to the parents. Parents need to make the decisions for their children and how they're educated, not these crazy teachers that have these ideologies that they think that they can just push down children's throats at a very young age. That's the scarier part of all of this, in my opinion.
No, your opinion is very spot on, and you're exactly right as far as this whole. That's why, to me, when I also look at it, and this is now we're going up to 25,000 foot level. But one of the things I would be looking at is to see, because the federal government doesn't fund that much of our Texas public education. They really don't. Okay, as a percentage. And so I'm sitting there going, you know what? If I can go through there and supplant that with, like I say, we have all these surpluses, and tell the federal education department to go take a flying leap. We don't care if you're not going to give us money, because we don't want your money, because we don't need your money from the Department of Education. You have the agriculture, which does the lunch programs, but that's a different deal. We're talking about the type of funding that the federal government gives directly into our schools systems through various grants and programs. So that's something I think we need to do, because a lot of that wokeness and those screwball ideas are coming out of the U.S. Department of Education, which should have gotten rid of. That is one way, I think, to address some of the wokeness that at least is coming from Washington.
I agree with that. Now moving on to other items, is there anything that you in particular, how can people help your campaign? I mean, where can people go and look for your information, and where can people make donations to your campaign?
One of the things that we can go through and have my website, goodgovernance.today, Mark Goloby for Texas. It's all linked together in that way. But www.goodgovernance.today. And there I have a whole panoply of things that you can look at, and you can drill down into my address on corporate welfare, my address on issues with Sharia law, how we need to be addressing that now. And we do not need a Sharia subculture to even begin to germinate in any form or fashion in the state of Texas, and how I would go through and address that. And then there is a donation button there, and would love to get some help here, get some gas money for me. So those are the things that people can do to directly help in me getting the word out. And I feel like this campaign has reached some success levels, because one of the things I've traveled across the state, all the way from Corpus Christi to Sweetwater, are these windmill blades that are being dumped on the ground.
Biodegradable, are they?
No,
They're not. There goes their stance with green energy, and we're going to save money. If we're destroying our country, if we can't have them be biodegradable.
Yeah, no, these things, they actually end up leaching all these microplastics into the groundwater. And then you turn around and pick up the paper, and here's some green group worried about the microplastics. And you're saying that, well, your windmills are a big part of that microplastic. And so, like I say, I've been all across the state. I went through and started pointing out over and over these facilities, posting on Facebook. Here's one in Odom. Here's one in Rankin. Here's one in Sweetwater. Here's what it does. Here's how look at these frayed off fringes of the fiberglass where the microplastics is leaching off, and on and on and on. And now Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, has come through and started to sue over performance on these issues. The city of Sweetwater is bringing criminal charges on the dumping that's going on there. So I'm sitting there going, well, none of these people called me, but I don't know anybody else who is raising this to a statewide level concern, to say these are not just isolated little pockets. They're everywhere, and they're going and go driving anywhere around in the rural area of Texas and realize every one of those poles times 3, every one of those blades is going to come down. So to me, what I'm saying is I'm going to have a moratorium on any new and replacement windmills until the industry can come up with how we are going to repurpose, reutilize, recycle these blades. They are petrochemical polymer fiberglass, and we need to figure out what we can do with them. And burying them in the ground is not the answer, because they still leach off, into the water supply, because you're not going to bury them below any of the water tables. So those are things, and I want the industry to solve it. The taxpayers of Texas, the taxpayers of America, have already financed these monstrosities. Okay. And it's time that the industry now take responsibility for their industrial waste. Farmers have stricter rules on what to do with their waste, okay, than what's happening with these windmill blades. And the good news about all this is not long ago, last month or so, Bill Gates came out and said that 1 degree increase in temperature is not as important as he said it was. So now I'm saying, oh, well, now I know the man with the money to go through there and clean up his mess that he's made, pushing false ideas onto the world, but definitely onto Texas. So you can come in here and you can clean up Texas, and I will tell the industry, if you want any more of this, you better figure out how to take care of the mess you've made, and force it onto the industry, because this is And a governor has to be overlooked. He can't just look at what's in front of him, because he's going to allow these blades to build up to such a massive level that it becomes an industrial waste situation that only the taxpayers can afford to fix. No, we're going to get in front of it. A governor looks at a problem that's starting to develop, get in front of it so that the industry can be held accountable, responsible, and told to go clean up their mess. Not wait till it becomes a catastrophe and says, well, hey, folks, you got to come clean this up. No, like I say, the taxpayers have been abused too much on these windmill and the whole green energy nonsense, but especially these windmills that are more obtrusive than anything. And we could also need to talk about the batteries, which is best. But what's your next question?
Well, we're almost out of time, but I quickly wanted to kind of, since this is kind of an immigration platform, and of course, we're giving you time, I wanted to kind of address where you stand on how important it is for the collaboration between local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. I know that this current governor has signed a memorandum making it a mandate, and of course, a state legislature move to require that sheriffs comply with the immigration laws that we're asking for. My former boss is Tom Holland, and so one of the things that I know is between Legacy INS and ICE, when I was there and worked there, can tell you how effective it was to have collaboration with HPD and the Harris County Sheriff's Department and the smaller pockets of other PDs when you have a criminal alien who poses a significant risk, because the ones that they're trying to go out and arrest that are on the target list that have been identified through various databases throughout ICE and different mechanisms in the federal law enforcement agencies. These are identified targets that are people that have been either previously deported, they have committed heinous crimes, some of them involve murder, a lot of them start as serious domestic violence cases. And these kids, they're not being, detainers to some degree aren't being honored. And why is it so difficult to agree that if you have another state who has a murderer in custody, who's another sheriff's department in a different state, then they collaborate with the sheriffs here, that they can transfer and bring that individual to justice in the state where the crime has been committed, and there's full cooperation. But you don't see the lack of cooperation with other agencies. It's just ICE. And it's just the rhetoric about we don't want to help them and we don't want to be deputized. And in my opinion, that's just bull, you know what, because we do need the cooperation. You can't just have federal agents running around. There's a threshold, but there's got to be, they've done it before. What does it take for you if this doesn't work out as a governor? What would be your stance on requiring a level of cooperation to kind of subside some of the crimes that happen to keep our communities safe?
Well, one thing that I can do and commit 100% to is I won't be allowing Colony Ridge settlements being established, which is almost another subculture of people who do not end up living in areas without the proper zoning and the proper construction and the proper anything else. In Colony Ridge, you can ask people, and you probably know this, is one of many. There's not just one Colony Ridge. There are several communities like that across the state. So the first thing you do is you start to have a governor who doesn't have a warm spot in his pocketbook for these types of facilities, and starts to address, okay, how do we start to clean up this so that you don't have these pockets of this subterranean development that allow these people to come in and have a place to run off to and be in. So that's one way, okay? Of course, all cooperation, if I go through there and I don't know, I think the city of Houston is a sanctuary city, and I would be sitting down with those who I would be saying in Dallas too, I'd be sitting down with those administrators and start looking at the state budget and saying, well, you can't be a sanctuary city. There's just no such thing. The city charters, the cities and the counties are established by the state. So you can't go through there and tell me, oh, well, we want to be a sanctuary city and allow violations of U.S. law and of state law, because if they're a sanctuary city, their state laws they're violating as well in not cooperating. So I know we have laws on the books that say we will cooperate with ICE and with the immigration policies, So again, that's something that a governor and a governor could have done that 10 years ago. He could have sat there and started saying, we're not going to have sanctuary cities in the state of Texas. The state of Texas will take away your charter. That's what the state of Texas can do. That's what a governor can do. And it's not going that you're going to, because the cities are going to realize, well, no, we don't want to do it that way. If there's any humanitarian issues that have to be involved, number one is the less you have, the less honey you have, the fewer bees come to it. Okay. So when you sit there and start taking that stuff off and cleaning up those types of levels, I don't know, maybe they all go stick to Arizona or California or whatever, where they do want to have sanctuary cities. But we just, at the state level, we're just not going to tolerate this feel good, woke thing of, oh, we want to be this. If there's charities that want to provide something for these people, that's one thing.
I see that as aiding and abetting illegal immigration.
Well, I agree with
No,
that. Yeah, no.
I don't think there's a person on the planet that doesn't have a big heart and wants these people to have some sort of, resolution to their problems. But we cannot afford to take everybody in. If I'm not mistaken, I think the last statistics showing the money that Texan taxpayers paid out just for the last 4 years under the Biden administration were almost $850 million a year, just to sustain some of the minors. This didn't include everything that went on. And I'm tired of, this happened during COVID, and we're all struggling to put food on our tables and figure out whether we can, if we have to get a second job and we're working from home. And then we're on top of that, we were required to pay the exuberant amount of taxes that we had to pay to sustain people that don't merit being here. That just was insanity to me. My husband and I, who are former ICE, just sat back and thought, we're just horrified at what has happened.
Well, it's definitely more of abuse of the taxpayers. Again, as you say, as far as the use of private funds. Well, how did they get this far north? You can't go through there. If you want to have some type of humanitarian aid at the border for some reason, okay, and you're a private, and part of that is let's go into the NGOs, and the NGOs end up being funded by the government. And I think in the last gubernatorial campaign, Alan West was going around detailing, and unfortunately, detailing some of the activity of the Catholic charities. And like you say, I'm sorry, I understand the charitable side, but doing charity to entice criminals to come deeper into the state. That's not charity. You're enticing criminals to come deeper into the state. And then, like you said, how good of a job are you vetting them to make sure they're not some wacko, rapist, lunatic person? And you're not. So you're not helping anybody by pretending to be open-hearted and then trying to fulfill this function and call it that you're doing it for the welfare. No, you're not doing it for the welfare. No one benefits from this policy. And I would just it just has to be stopped. And again, I realize that there's things I'd have to look at as a governor to make sure that certain T's are crossed and I's are dotted. But I also know that a governor has a lot of latitude in the expenditure of the state coffers, to the point that, going back to some of the corporate welfare stuff, that's one of the things I look at with people is in some of these programs I've seen the new Chapter 313 they replaced with this Jedi program and whatever. It puts a lot of discretion into the governor's hands. And I look at people in the audience and I look at them and I tell you, I promise you, I will be as discreet with your hard-earned tax dollars as anyone would be, because this isn't my money, it's yours. And I think it's just terrible when I see some of the legislation that comes out and you're sitting there going, you wouldn't do that with your own money. Davy Crockett had a complete, I wish I could quote it, as far as his statement on, hey, we can do whatever we want to do with our own money, but we can't do charity with this public money. And I'm doing a very poor job of the quote, but that was the essence of the quote. And then Thomas Jefferson has the to use a man's funds for things he disbelieves and abhors is sinful and tyrannical. And I look out at the audience and I say, yes, folks, our legislature acted sinfully and tyrannically. And the sin is against the Texas taxpayer. The sin is against the Texas taxpayer, and this abuse has to stop.
It does.
And I plan on stopping it. I plan on stopping it cold. Because I won't have any of these corporate ties and all I didn't raise $100 million, and you don't raise $100 million from grassroots donations. You raise $100 million because I gave a company a tax abatement. I gave a company some subsidy, and then, oh, thank you. Oh, look at that. Imagine this. I get this PAC donation back. That's how you get a $100 million campaign chest.
Right. Well, Mark, we're almost to the end of our show. I wanted to give you an opportunity to say any last thoughts. And again, to highlight exactly how people can donate to your website. So with that, and then we'll wrap it up. And I can't thank you enough for your time this afternoon. I know that you've been driving all over the state.
Yeah, and I find it invigorating. I do enjoy it. You get to meet a lot of people. You get to hear a lot of interesting issues that are going on around our state that I've been going through. I guess somebody one time looked at me and said, well, you're just about solutions. And I go, well, yes, I am, and I'm proud of it, and that's why I want to be governor. That's why I should be. To me, again, my passion is for the Texas taxpayer. My passion is that all Texans pay lower taxes, whether they own property or not, and to make sure that those tax dollars get the respect that they deserve from in how they get dispersed to serve all of Texans. Not just few or not just groups that I feel that I want to reward this industry, that industry, or this person or that person. So, I mean, that's what drives me. I mean, when I went through, and this is my second statewide campaign, when I ran for comptroller, one of the things I said was we need to have elected representation on the appraisal board of directors. In 2023, it was passed. And after 40 years of no taxpayers being on that panel, now we've got in Harris County, we've got 3. So hopefully they'll ask the questions and make the challenges, and you're starting to see it. You're starting to see those kind of questions. That kind of scrutiny is paying off as the governor comes up with his property tax reforms, which are, if you go to my website, Good Governance Today, are eerily close to what's on my website. But he didn't give me a footnote. He wouldn't even give me a footnote. But at any rate, so those are things that drive. I think we need to look at our public education. Many of the things that you had said earlier about how our public education, about teaching for test results, not educating, and that has to stop. I was just at the lunch today. I was talking to a retired teacher, and these tests serve nothing. And the statistics that generate actually mean nothing. And so not only are we failing our children to teach them how to think, not what to think, how to use their heads, how to use information to come up with conclusions. No, we're not doing that anymore. We're just teaching them how to here's the answer, just put that in there. And how do I get that answer? Don't worry about how to get it, just write it. And that is not serving us well. We know from our founding fathers, we know from the second president of Texas, Mirabeau Lamar, to have a free people, they have to be an educated people. Educated means you know how to ask questions and you know when things don't line up. And those are the things I think that if you ask me what's passionate about my campaign, and again, it's www.goodgovernance.today. There's a donate tab up there. Please hit that. And like I say, if all you do is send me a couple of bucks for gas, that'll keep me going. And I appreciate it. Thanks, Louisa. Thanks for allowing this opportunity for visit with your audience and discuss these issues. And again, let's make Texas Texas again.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, thank you very much, and good luck on your continued campaign. We're certainly going to try to edit this as quickly as possible and get it on the air before March 3rd to get you some more mileage. But I want to close in conclusion. Thank you, everybody who's listening in today. We want to thank you. If you have anybody that you would like to recommend to come on the show, we are filming Fast and Furious right now, and we are looking for advertisers. It's something that we will continue to do to get these episodes and interview a lot more people. So anyway, we want to thank you very much, Mark, and This is a conclusion to our new podcast called Frontline Facts, and it's correcting the rhetoric. So thank you again for tuning in. Until next time.